Hello, and welcome to episode 167 of Dark and Stormy Book Club. Today we visit with Timothy Miller. Enjoy. I'm Ann Dark.
I'm Tracy Stormy.
And I'm Kathy Knight.
And together we are
It Was a Dark and Stormy Book Club,
a podcast for mystery lovers.
Welcome. If you enjoy our show, please consider contributing to the Dark and Stormy Patreon. By becoming a patron, you will help us create better and quality content. There are also benefits to becoming a patron, such as exclusive content and Dark and Stormy merchandise. Become a supporter at patreon.com/darkandstormybc. Check our website for the link. We appreciate any and all contributions. Thank you.
In the strange case of Eliza Doolittle, Sherlock Holmes has retired to the Sussex countryside. That is, until a most formidable puzzle is dropped onto his doorstep by a certain Colonel Pickering. One Miss Eliza Doolittle, once nothing more than a cockney guttersnipe, has been transformed into a proper lady of London, perhaps even a duchess, as if overnight. When Colonel Pickering recovered from a bout of malaria, he was astounded at the woman before him. Is it possible this transformation is due to nothing more than elocution lessons and a few splendid new hats? Or has Professor Henry Higgins surreptitiously traded one girl for another? And for God's sake, why? As the case unfolds, Holmes and Watson find themselves in even stranger territory. Who are the four identical Freddies pursuing Miss Doolittle? What part do the respected Dr. Jekyll and his malevolent associate Mr. Hyde, long thought dead, have to play in this caper? And who in the devil is the devilish Baron von Stettin? The strange case of Eliza Doolittle is an enthralling escapade, starring some of Victorian literature's most beloved characters. A historical mystery that will leave you delighted, perplexed, and positively bewildered. Timothy Miller is a wanderer from North Louisiana. He's lived in Houston, Los Angeles, New Orleans, San Francisco, his beloved Chicago, Lincoln, Nebraska, and even spent some time living La Dolce Vita in Milan, which, un-English though it is where the inspiration for the strange case of Eliza Doolittle began. Timothy Miller is a screenwriter, poet, and playwright. Doolittle is his first novel. His second Sherlock Holmes novel is on the way. We would like to welcome Timothy Miller to the program. He has a very unique book out called The Strange Case of Eliza Doolittle. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
This is probably one of the most unique Sherlock Holmes books I've ever read, and I enjoyed it immensely. I think I got 15 pages in and called my partner here and said, oh, this is a definite go.
Excellent.
You had a very unique mix of characters in this book. What made you think of these characters and think, they all need to be in a book together?
Well, actually, I'm going to tell you the origin of this grouping was totally random. I was in Milan teaching English, and I wanted to write a little story for an Italian couple that I was tutoring to demonstrate prepositions. So I decided to do a little murder mystery and use very famous English characters that they would know, and from my favorite time period, late Victorian and Edwardian. In that story, I think Eliza murdered Higgins. And there I let it rest. But it wouldn't rest. I started to ask myself the very question that the book poses. What if Eliza wasn't Eliza? What if she had been replaced? Well, then why? Whenever I have a really thorny problem, I call him the best, Sherlock Holmes. Then, since it's always necessary and good to explore a character's shadow, I thought of Hyde, because Eliza wants to transform. She wants to shed her class origins, which has always been very difficult in England, even difficult here. Well, so does Dr. Jekyll, except Eliza wants to move up in society, and Jekyll wants to move down. So there's this whole fluidity of character to explore that was something new in the age, very new with the late Victorian and Edwardian period, that makes detection difficult for someone like Sherlock Holmes, who depends on things staying the same way. And then there was the whole paired bachelor situation of Holmes and Watson and Higgins and Pickering to explore. There are really all these parallels once you dig into it. But I had no idea once I first assembled the group that they were there.
I really enjoyed your trip down memory lane, revisiting some of the past Sherlock characters. Have you considered writing a prequel with Holmes?
Well, I've already written a prequel of sorts. It's with my editor, but it's with real-life characters this time. Holmes investigates the murder of Vincent van Gogh.
Oh, I love that story.
As far as a mashup of fictional characters, I think I would love to do something with the Count of Monte Cristo.
Ooh,
interesting.
Edmond Dantes would have to be very old and Holmes was very young, so I don't know if I could make it work. Maybe Louise Vernet, the mother of Sherlock. That could be interesting.
Ooh, that would be.
I like your mind thinks.
This novel almost included Rupert of Hentzau from The Prisoner of Zenda as the secondary villain instead of Colonel von Stettin. I decided that was a bridge too far, and I couldn't make the timelines work. It also does include a cameo by Bertie Wooster of Wooster and Jeeves, but I couldn't name him due to copyright restrictions. I don't know whether he figured that out or not.
Well, the good thing about everybody in this book is public domain, so you didn't really have to worry about any of that.
And that was one of the reasons it took me so long to actually write the book, was that I was waiting for Sherlock Holmes to come into public domain.
You describe yourself as a John Watson groupie. Can you tell us one surprising thing that you learned about him during your research that gave him the star status?
Well, really, I described Watson as the first Holmes groupie, but I suppose I am something of a Watson groupie. I mean, we're both writers, and we both write about Sherlock Holmes. But one thing I discovered is that Watson is very protective of Holmes, even as he gains recognition as Holmes' associate by writing about him. And I discovered, or deduced, or maybe imagined a great deal from Watson's pocket watch that Holmes was far too discreet to mention, because, of course, Holmes has his own share of family secrets, which I explore in the books. I think that Watson's brother and father both drink. He is an interesting character, but he's so self-effacing, unless you really train your eye on him, you can miss him.
I have to say that I'm a big fan of Watson also. I read your article in Crime Read called The Mystery of Holmes, Why We Return to Conan Doyle Over and Over. I really liked your take on, and I never really thought about it, that I think that without Watson, his detective skills would have been a little lackluster. I think there was maybe some embellishment going on.
I'm going to do something that I really hate to do, which is criticize a book. Because I hate to do it, I'm going to not mention the author and not mention the title. But this author wrote a Sherlock Holmes pastiche that I really loved. It was the first Sherlock Holmes pastiche I read, and it inspired me to write this one. But recently, I read another pastiche of his. It has Holmes narrating and no Watson, and I hated it. Because without Watson, Holmes becomes a mere bumbling mortal, and we can see his mind, and it seems like a fourth-rate mind, because we don't have Watson. I mean, Holmes should always be a black box, and Watson should always be there to keep him at arm's length. Look at The Adventure of the Lion's Mane. That was one by Doyle, where Holmes narrates and Watson is absent. If you remember, the culprit turns out to be a jellyfish.
Yes.
Oh, yes, yes.
Holmes could not have figured out immediately that the death was caused by a jellyfish, especially having read about this particular jellyfish himself, means that because Watson is not there to pose all these questions and not get the immediate deduction from Holmes, Holmes has to run around like a chicken with his head cut off just for there to be a story at all. So, like I said, without Watson, Holmes is completely unguarded and loses his mystique. I think that mystery is a great attraction of Holmes.
In your book, since Sherlock has reached his retirement age, Watson had a lot more to do in your book. And I thought that was great when he went off by himself, and we got to really see that he has some deductive skills as well.
Oh, yes. And, Holmes admits as much several times even in the canon, but Watson is so completely overshadowed by Holmes. Watson is an extremely intelligent man. He's just not Sherlock Holmes. He's as brave as a lion and as faithful as a dog. It has so many admirable qualities. I think they were forged in adversity from a very young age. And so, yes, I don't mind giving Watson the spotlight at all.
Why do you think that a lot of productions and books portray Watson as this bumbling sort of just a follower?
I think that may have been Nigel Bruce's fault in the original movies, or not the original movies, but the most famous movies, the Basil Rathbone movies.
Right.
He decided to play it that way, I guess to even play up more Holmes's genius. I think it was a bad decision and has marked Watson ever since. Watson is now more getting his due in some of the new movie versions, or not exactly according to canon either.
That's true.
This book seems to shut down the adage about Pygmalion of a budding love between Higgins and Eliza. Why did you feel it was important to write it that way?
Well, what you have to realize is that Shaw never intended a love affair between Higgins and Eliza. It would really be like, A Doll's House? It would be like Nora, after slamming the door slam heard round the world, going back to Torval. The play is meant to be a feminist statement. Even in My Fair Lady, she says, "Goodbye, Professor Higgins. You shall not be seeing me again." And, of course, in the afterword that Shaw wrote, he conjectures that Eliza will marry Freddie. I discovered that actors began undermining Professor Higgins, trying to make him more palatable and more audience-friendly. Directors followed suit, making Higgins, who was really an old curmudgeon, softer around the edges. And then Hollywood came along and just nailed him to the cross with My Fair Lady.
Yes, they did.
Especially on that final scene to please the crowd. Higgins is not really a very nice man at all. I think readers of the book will be glad that Eliza doesn't wind up with him.
I liked the ending of your book. I thought that was great.
That was very well done.
This book could also be a cautionary tale of drug experimentation and overuse. Was this one of the themes you were trying to get across to the reader?
To tell you the truth, I hadn't really thought about it. But now that you mention it, both Eliza and Hyde use drugs to effect and to achieve a wholly different personality, and both do become dependent on those drugs with calamitous results, which seems to be the way a lot of people use drugs today, to become someone else and get out of their skin. I think it's far better to face who you are and live in your own skin. I guess maybe some of that might have gotten through, even unconsciously.
You have stated that you had a stroke before signing the contract for this book. Do you think you view life and your writing in a different light than you did before the stroke?
Yes, I do, and I'm not sure that I can quantify it, but I'm in more of a hurry, which may seem strange coming from a 63-year-old man who's just put out his first book. It took me a long time to find my niche, and now that I find I have a lot of books I want to write and a lot of things I want to say. I've become fairly fierce now about how to achieve it. For one thing, I've learned to depend on those people around me, to ask them when I need help, because those people are waiting to help, which is something that I couldn't admit before.
That's one of the hardest things, is to ask for help.
Yes. I want to go on the road this summer promoting the book, even though I have no idea how. So if you're a bookstore owner or a book club moderator who's itching to come out of lockdown or even would like to Zoom, I am available if you're listening.
We have a lot of connections to book groups, and we